Please welcome our keynote speaker, Chang Ji, who will give a talk titled, You Don't Have to Fix Everything First. Let's welcome Chang Ji.
All right, hello everyone. Thank you, Dr. Hong Jinshan and Dr. Lo Min Hui, and the DDM Shenyang Education Foundation, IPCS, and CWA for organizing this and inviting me here to share. And wonderful delegates that we've invited from all over the world. Okay, so we know that our perceptions actually shape our stories and our solutions and our world. However, you know, our narratives and our assumptions are usually unquestioned. And then when that is unquestioned, we end up weaving the threads of the problem into the changes we want to make, right? So I'd like to quote, I always, like in my talks or in my classes, I always like to quote Einstein. I think some of you know what the quote is going to be, right? His definition of insanity. Do you know what it is? Who wants to give a try? What is the definition of insanity according to Einstein? Yeah, usually this is what happens. When I ask a question, everyone starts looking down, right? And hoping that I'm not going to pick on you. So I will not put you in a difficult position, but Einstein's quote is, you can't fix a problem, okay, with the same mindset that created the problem in the first place. So in other words, we need to clear the field on a personal level and on a social and political level and unlearn the things we assume we know. Okay, so this unlearning is based on perceptions that are nearly universal in our culture and can be applied in many ways, right? So it offers a space for reflection. That's why you don't have to fix everything right now, right? Give yourself that space for reflection, and once you see the patterns, right, of this kind of mindset that created the problem in the first place, you'll begin to actually see that everywhere. Right? It's not just in that one problem that you're seeing, but you'll see it everywhere. And it will give you a lens, right, by which to view the world in a very different way, in a different solution. Let me ask you a question. Now, don't look down, okay? It's a very easy question, and you see this on social media every day. Tell me what's happening around the world right now. Just shout out the answer. War, yeah. Baseball. Good. Sports, good. Sportsmanship. What else is happening around the world? Natural disasters. Fear. Mm-hmm. Terry? I know one audience member here. What's happening around the world? Global warming? Sorry, you're very soft. Okay. Anything else that you know of that's happening around the world? No? AI, yes, that's I think it's a kind of a polarizing kind of a technology. Okay, so there's a lot of things that are happening. Even like, you know, it's not just global, even like within each country, there's a lot of polarization that is happening. There's a lot like, I don't know if it happened in Taiwan, but you know, where I'm working in New York, we have in the subways, people shoving, you know, people off the platforms. And there's school shootings. Or shopping mall shootings, right? There's a lot of violence everywhere. So, now let me ask you a question here. Who wants change? 中文是谁想看见改变？举手。Who wants change? Very good. Okay, now let me ask you another question. Who wants to change? 谁愿意改变？You see there's like a hesitation before hands come out, right? This is because you always expect someone else to make the change. But when you're asked to make the sacrifice, no. I like the life I have right now. I like the convenience that I'm experiencing right now. So that's one of the things. But you have to know that you are going to be inheriting a world that is seeing the crumbling and the breaking down of the colonial industrial systems. It is breaking down, okay? And it sounds very depressing, isn't it? You're inheriting this world that's like, what you know as normal is breaking down. Sounds very depressing. Wonderful. Okay, it's great, because why? In this tumultuous and this chaotic dying of a system that no longer can serve us, there's a huge pregnant space of new emergence. You have chosen to be born during a time in human civilization where you can make a difference. You can make a difference, right? You're not sitting there feeling helpless, but you can make a difference. So that is actually extremely, extremely exciting. So it's a future that you can co-create together, right? So look at it that way, it's great. So when you hear this, and then what happens? We want to jump straight into action, right? So immediately we ask, so okay, how do we fix the problem, right now? How do we fix the problem? So I would tell you, stop right there, okay? Don't try to jump and immediately try to fix the problem. Because our natural tendency, okay, is to jump into action immediately and then use corrective policies and practices to regulate, the wrong behaviors away, and then determine, the behaviors we want to see. That's what we typically do when you fix a problem, right? So this is what happens. Okay, so when you do that, right, you're actually only in the fixing mode, right? When you're in the fixing mode, you're just dealing with things that are going wrong. When you do that, let me share with you an analogy. You know coal mines, right? So there's this abandoned coal mine. How do you say that in Chinese? Coal mine. 矿. 煤矿, right? It's an old coal mine that was abandoned, okay? And there you are, you see fires erupting in this tunnel and in that tunnel, and it's in different places, and you're running around with a hose. So when fires are erupting in different tunnels, it's kind of like maybe school shootings, or increasing violence, or increasing apathy, or we say climate change, or we see war. We're running around with a fire hose, like a fireman, trying to kind of, let me just show this, it's easier, right? So it's trying to put out the fire, but every time you put out a fire, another fire erupts in another tunnel, and then you put that out, and then another fire erupts in the tunnel, and you try to put it out, and you keep running and running and running. What happens? You start feeling very tired. It's as if you can never put out all the fires in the tunnels of this coal mine. And then what happens is when you hear this enough, now in the beginning, I think maybe about 6 or 8 years ago, if you hear climate change issues or natural disasters, you're very, very sad about this, and you would try to see if you could do something to help the people of those natural disasters, correct? And one thing though, I travel to a lot of countries, I have to say there is no country in the world like Taiwan. Why? Because Taiwanese are very generous, and they're very warm, and they love. You don't see this in a lot of countries, right? So this is one specialty in Taiwan. So you run around and you try to put out the fires, and you get very tired. And as you keep hearing more natural disasters, what happens? You start to become numb, and you normalize this, and it no longer affects you. In the beginning, when the Russia and Ukraine war broke out, there was so much indignation, there was so much anger and frustration and discussion. Right now, it's like, meh. You hear another news, eh. You normalized it, and that is actually very dangerous. Because when you do that, you lose your humanity, you lose your ability to care for people. One of the key things that I'm talking about, this fires erupting in all these different tunnels, is you did not stop and realize that there is a fire that is raging under the coal mine. That's why it's erupting in all these tunnels that you will never be able to put out unless you put out the fire that is raging under the coal mine, right? So think of the situation that we're in right now, right? So we have maybe a school shooting here, or maybe some atrocity that is happening there, maybe human trafficking that is happening, or I think recently Taiwan or this region has experienced a very severe typhoon. I forget what's the name. Rajasa or something? Dr. Hong? Is that right? Ragasa, thank you. So Typhoon Ragasa, there was so much devastation, and I think there was a lot of devastation in Hualien, right, over here. So, you know, we need to really understand that all of these are outgrowth of a deep system, right? And, you know, the story and the mythology of the system that we're living in right now. And isn't that, I'm not saying like, you know, okay, so instead of feeling for it, we just ignore it, we just observe it like a spectator. No, you just have to, and say that, yeah, I'm just watching this as a spectator because you know what? There's no way I could put out the fire under the coal mine, right? I'm a nobody. I'm just an individual. I can't make a difference. When we have the panel discussion, you will listen to the seven people that did not believe in that. They believed that they can make a difference. So can you. Right, so, now let me talk about one thing. How you form ideas about the world. You do not realize that the current system is actually war mentality, right? The narratives in the media and even within my own head is inviting me into hating somebody. If you observe this of the media, it's always making you choose which side are you on. In your mind, it's always like, you know, which side are you on? So then, and the media will do that all the time, and they're kind of like one adrenaline jolt after another, right? One fix after another. You know, I, as a recipient of all these data, is always kept at an ever-increasing state of agitation and unrest. That's what media is doing. It just makes you more and more and more agitated because it's forcing you to choose a side. And when you're in this kind of state of agitation and unrest, then what happens is this kind of emotion is very easily weaponized, right, for manipulation. They keep you anxious so that they could manipulate you. If you see that system, Einstein is saying, change your mindset. You see that the system, you will see this pattern everywhere, right? So it's kind of really disturbing for me actually to see the level of hate and this level of war thinking and this level of polarization and dehumanizing of the enemy. And, you know, I've always the enemy on the other side, and how do they do that? So they always do this. Right, so which side are you on? Okay, so it triggers this us versus them mentality, right? And it doesn't matter, you know, what the issue is, right? It is always about which side are you on. And if you choose not to be on a side and you say something unorthodox, you guys, some of you know, right? And what happens is that they get very uncomfortable because they can't identify which side you are on, right? So they're trying to force you to choose a side. So that's what you have to figure out first. Which side are you on? Because they want to know if you're a friend or a foe. This determines their identity. You a friend or foe, right? And if you're on team good, which is my team, or you're on team evil, which is on the other side, so if you don't easily fit into any of these two sides, then you're the object of suspicion and hostility, right? Because in a war, enemy is not as detested as the pacifist because they know where you are. But if you're the pacifist, you're the worst enemy because they don't know where you are, right? Because at least the enemy validates your identity, right? So, like, who am I, right? We build identities from these stories that surround us. So the story of us versus them, that's our identity. Let's say I'm Canadian, or I'm American, or I'm on the side of freedom, or, you know, I'm on the side of democracy, or they're the Russians, right? They're the terrorists, oh, there's the corporations, or the governments. They're always somebody else, because I know who I am through who they are. So if you question this categorization, this labeling of the self and this other, right, you can see that maybe this whole premise of the war is actually faulty. It's actually faulty, right? So now, let me share an example. I'm going to use the example in America. We're trying to how we piece this puzzle together. Now, in the US, it happens in a lot of countries too, this issue of immigration. Now, in America, there's this very big thing that I think some of you know of. What happens, what is being built between the wall, between the border of Mexico and the US? A wall, right? So there is this wall, and then this debate over this wall is, which side are you on? Are you supporting the keeping them out? Right, build a wall, keep them out, or do not build the wall, welcome them over. So see the war mentality. So the conversation is always on that level only. You never really ask deeper questions, right? So which side are you on? But if you really ask deeper questions, that's why don't jump into fix. Asking a deeper question would be, why are all these people wanting to immigrate in the first place? Right? And what makes life in their home country so unlivable that they would risk everything, like everything, and leave everything behind for a completely uncertain future? You're asking these deeper questions. Or what made their home so unlivable? Instead of just which side are you on, you're actually looking at them as human beings. What is it that made them want to leave? When you're asking these deeper questions, you know what's emerging? You realize that the situation cannot be externalized. And it is not so simple. It is actually a very, very uncomfortable territory, because there's no easy solution and you're part of the problem. Because the way you're living right now, the comforts that you have right now, all the costs have been externalized to them, to these people. You've externalized. Is it possible, let's say right now, for example, Taiwan, I think one of the visitors when they come, I remember Reen was saying, we need to go get bubble tea. Right? And how much is a cup of bubble tea? I don't know. How much is a cup of bubble tea? $60? Right, so $60. Now, if you really, really look at this cup of bubble tea, okay, from extraction, right, to manufacturing all the different things that makes this bubble tea, to distribution, to your hands, does it cost $60? Does it cost $60? So who's paying for all the other costs that you didn't pay for? Destruction of the environment. The labors that go into, like, you know, in the developing countries that are going into factories to manufacture all the ingredients for this. To the people that is distributing this. To the nature, the contamination that is happening in nature. Who's paying for that? They are. So we are part of the problem, our convenience. The lifestyle that we're enjoying right now, they are paying the price for it. So when you see it that way, you realize it's not so simple. It's not so simple as building a wall or not. So that's why we say, look deeper, because then your mindset shifts, because you see a different sets of information, of data. Then you would make decisions in a way that is different, because you see that you're part of it too. Now, let me say another thing. How you form ideas about others. The same war mentality is in there. And that is what we call, like for instance, Let me raise an example. You're confronting a problem that's called consumerism, right? You've heard this all the time, and it has been around for a very long time. And you say, okay, yeah, I think I'm going to do something about this, right? And then, how do we fix this? We're going to make all the consumers feel bad, right? You're bad. You know what you're doing? You're destroying like what's the livelihood of Mexico or other countries. They make you feel really, really bad, as if you're a sinner. And what is this a symptom of, though? What made us dehumanize other people? You should ask that question. Am I a full person, but others are not? Let me raise an example. The chairs you're sitting on, right? You don't see it as when we say full human or a living thing that has every right to enjoy life as you do, so you have no compunction about sitting on it, standing on it, spilling water on it, tearing it up, throwing it away. You have no compunction because you objectified it as something for yourself, right? So what this is actually what we call dehumanizing and objectification. So let me raise another example. Now in America, there is this very serious, long-standing issue called racism, right? So white supremacists would belittle people of color, right? So what happens? So people of color, when you're belittled, what do? You belittle them again, the white supremacists. And then the white supremacists are not happy, right? And then it's going like, I'm team good, you're team evil, so I'm going to get more people. I'm going to convince more people to come on my side because I'm team good and they're team evil. So you'll do everything to convince people that they are team evil. So what does the people of color do? We do the same thing, right? So we're team good and the white supremacists are team evil. So we're going to get a lot of people on our side to also belittle them. So this is actually dehumanization and objectification. It's called othering. You blame everyone else, but instead of looking at yourself as part of the problems, okay? And you know what you do is when you dehumanize and when you objectify, you're slapping a label on someone else or on some living thing, right? When you slap a label on that, then it's like, if this label is in my way, I'm going to get rid of it. Okay, and it's a me versus them. You see ourselves separate from others, and you want to change that. You want to understand that all this, like, you know, sexism, racism, all the isms, you know, from which the field of this behavior springs from. It's othering. It's war mentality that we have been we have been unconsciously conditioned. Now, another thing is that, you know, when you look at that, is this racism is the dehumanization of people of other skin color, making them less human. So as consumers or as human beings, how can we treat nature as that too? That they are less than we are. That we could exploit them for our convenience and our comfort. That they have no right to enjoying life and flourishing as what we do. So you look at that, examine that. That is the pattern. That is the mentality that brought us to where we are today. But we're at the nexus where you could change. You could change that by changing your mindset. So how do we do that? Now, earlier on, I showed you this slide before, right, on dealing with things that are actually going wrong. When we change our mindset, instead of saying, oh, this is a problem and I have to deal with it, because when you say this is a problem and I have to deal with it, you're making yourself right and making something else wrong. So that's more mentality again. So instead of saying that, fixing a problem, let's say, how do we help things go right? It is more expansive, it's opening, right? So when we want to sustain change, though, we need to shift our mindsets and help things go right. And how do we do that? So instead of correcting, okay, we don't see things as objects. We don't see other living beings, other human beings as objects. What is objects? Is this thing going to benefit me? Is this thing going to harm me, or is a challenge, or is an obstacle for me? Or this thing is irrelevant in my objectives. This is seeing them as objects. Notice that in your daily life. This is what we do all the time, right? This is what we do all the time. We assess, right? And then our behaviors will be in accordance with how we view, how we label this, right? If you're a harm, if you're a challenge to me, I will find ways to get rid of you. I will belittle you. I will convince other people of your lack of value or how you're an obstacle to the entire project, and I'll find ways to get rid of you, right? So how do we help things go right then? We don't see things as objects anymore. I have my needs, I have my objectives, but other people and other beings, other living beings on this planet also have their goals and their objectives and every right to thrive. So when you do that, you see people and you see things, and you see living things. So when you can do that, then you build healthy relationships based on trust. Because I am human. You are human. What I have a right to enjoy, you have a right to enjoy. I am earthling. A tree is an earthling. I have a right to enjoy and thrive on this planet, and they have a right to enjoy and thrive on this planet. So you build a healthy relationship that way because you see that we share this together. When you can build healthy relationships, that is when you can listen to each other and learn from each other. And when you can do that, that is when you can teach and you can communicate. So you don't coerce people. Rather, we inspire each other to do things together, right? And when you can teach and communicate, that is when you can correct a problem because you co-create that solution. So this is the suggestion that I'm proposing to you. Don't jump right into fixing the problem. It is easy and it is really fast, but helping things go right is not fast. It takes time to cultivate, but it is long-standing and it is long-term. I'd like to share with you also one thing that Master Sheng Yen does. This is his being wherever he goes, and I practice that myself too. It doesn't matter how you benefit from that place. What is important is how that place benefits from you being there. Your presence there, how it benefits you. You can think about that one, okay? Let me ask you a question. What is the legacy you want to leave behind? Anyone? What do you think is the legacy that you're going to leave behind for your descendants? Anyone?
Education.
Okay, education, right. Knowledge. I think you're maybe too young to even think about legacy, right? Too young to think about children, right? But how do you want, let me phrase it this way. How do you want people in the future to look at you? What do you think you're going to leave behind? Maybe 2 people who are courageous enough?
Humanity.
Humanity, okay, Reen?
I think for me, I was inspired by Jane Goodall. And
Jane Goodall.
Yeah, so I want a legacy that's similar to hers, that when I leave, people would be like, she started something that no humans have thought of before. She named animals rather than give them numbers, for example.
Right, okay, so let me repeat what Reen said. She says it's like, like Jane Goodall, right? She passed away recently, and she left legacy behind where she humanized science. She gave the baboons that she observed, they're not treated as objects. They're not treated as, a lab animal which they're collecting data. She gave them names, right? She humanized that, so that's wonderful. And the young man behind Reen?
Maybe the faith or hope.
Faith or hope.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, now, if I talk about this in terms of the planet, okay, Earth, time, and space, the legacy that you're going to be leaving behind is the state of this planet. Is it healthy? Or is it ill? Not only that, there's another part to it. The legacy that you're going to leave behind for your descendants is the type of people living on it. So it's not about what you leave behind for them, it's how you be right now. That is what they're going to remember you by. Thank you.